Go see what the Greens have to say.
So that's the BC NDP in a nutshell. Now we're going to flip over to BC Greens. Now, anecdotally, BC Greens, thank you. Thank you so much for putting your platform in a PDF. Because that way I'm not clicking stupid bubbles on a website and trying to figure out what your stupid platform is, because you put it in a document that I can read and I can just go through it like a list. It's great. I love it. Thank you. Sorry. So been a lot of staring at websites today.
Done nerding out now.
I am.
Okay.
So BC Green policies.
So let's just do the quick review. Let's just the.
Oh my gosh, where did it go?
Whoa.
They call it resilient communities. So housing by 2035, their big high level desire is that everyone living in BC can afford a home that meets their needs as renters or owners.
Ooh, that's a big one.
I know, and they define the problem: hard to access affordable housing. Housing isn't served primarily as a mechanism for increasing wealth rather than ensuring fair access to housing for all. You are speaking my language here, First to Know. You are speaking my language. Believe that housing is a basic human right, a place where individuals, families, communities can live in security and dignity, not a tool for generating profit. I like this. They're coming back to the emotional.
Aren't you a homeowner?
I am, but
you want your house to be profitable?
I want to be able to afford, I want to be able to afford another bigger house.
I think, but so you want.
Well, my house is worth over $100,000 more than what I paid for it.
I know, but do you want to lose money on your bill?
As long as I don't lose $100,000.
You still want to come up? There we go.
There
we go. Profit motivated.
I am buying. I'm not going to sell my house for the same price I bought it for, guys. Okay, I'm not that.
No,
generous.
You want to sell it for much less.
You're right. I want to lose that 40%. So specific policies. So they've actually laid this out really nicely. We're going to go really quick through things because we spent a lot of time. And we might not touch on their last item, which is climate proofing, because that seems like an unfair advantage because none of the other policies. Maybe we'll just talk about it.
Go read it. Go read
it. Okay.
Do your own research.
Yeah.
Don't listen to us.
Yeah. But they do actually have an entire section about climate proofing the housing market, which neither of the other two platforms really spoke about at all. So specifically for renters, we're going to go category by category. For renters, the policy that the BC Greens want to enact to support you are prevent landlords from dramatically increasing rents after a tenancy ends by implementing vacancy control measures.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's a big one. Create province-wide minimum standards for tenant protection to safeguard renters from rent evictions and other forms of displacement. Arguably already happening in legislation by the NDP, but it's a good policy, so we'll give it to them. Enhance the residential tenancy branch to address tenant and landlord disputes more effectively. Ensure fair and timely resolutions.
I don't know how they're going to do that.
Yeah, hire more people.
Hire them.
Hire more people, because I think that's a very under-resourced government branch. And then increase funding to $164 million annually for shelter aid for elderly renters and rental assistance programs. So these are rental assistance programs. Usually, I think they're run through BC Housing. Could be wrong. And if I'm wrong, then that looks really bad on me as a social worker. But I think they're run through BC Housing, where elderly renters who are usually on a fixed income, they can take advantage of basically just like aid to make sure that they're not evicted. And they want to raise the rent ceilings and index them to inflation and expand eligibility to better support low-income renters. I got no bad notes on any of these things.
Raise the rent ceiling?
Yeah, because right now
allowing people to charge more rent.
Well, yeah, but here's the problem: people are charging more rent anyway. So if your rent ceiling is like, so if you're trying to get a BC housing subsidy and your rent ceiling is, well, I can only subsidize an $1,800 rent, and your rent is $1,900, we're kind of
right. Okay,
right? Like
so
I think that's what they're referring to, and then indexing them to inflation. So that means that as the rent ceilings go up with inflation, they'll go up.
So they'll spend more money to help people pay their rent.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it all sounds nice.
Well, okay, let's just carry on. Let's carry on.
Well, you got no notes, the vacancy control measures. You seem to react to that.
I'm going to be fair. there really does need to be a lot more. If we want to actually take a really strong stand on housing, um, this is a point specifically against financialized owners, uh, where we're looking at it going, hey, we want to implement some measure of rent control, which is you can't be rent evicted. And I mean, I know lots of people who have gone through rent evictions.
Yeah.
I've and it's a real problem. No, the flip side of that is I also know people who have, done renovations as landlords and never rent evicted anybody because they take care of the tenants who've been paying their bills for the last X number of years. And
Yeah.
this, sometimes things need to get fixed. So they fix them.
I think, yeah, it's such a hard balance because if you don't allow landlords to raise rents, right, beyond X percentage,
Sure.
right, and you have older properties where there are a lot of things breaking and a lot of things going wrong and a lot of things that need to be fixed, at some point that landlord is going to go like, look, this is not worth my
I can't
I'm
live it,
either
yeah.
I'm either not going to replace things and I'm not going to do my due diligence as a landlord to make sure your place is livable, or I'm going to rent evict you, right? Because that's just the
I need to
reality.
pay
It's a
for yeah,
financial decision.
I need to
I
pay for the
I
renovations.
get it. Like I get it. Landlords are not made of money. Some of them make a lot of money, but a lot of them don't. So I get it. They want to
Scale up
next one. So
non-market housing.
non-market housing. So again, we're touching
That's
on
a terrible
non-market.
word. I
I know
object to
you really
non-market
don't
housing.
like non-market housing. They would like to. They're putting specific numbers on it. So 1.5 billion dollars annually to create 26,000 new units of non-market housing each year,
Do a quick, keep going. I'm just
with
doing some math.
3,000 units dedicated specifically for Indigenous people. So this is actually the first platform that has had any like specific acknowledgement of the Indigenous community in BC in the housing platform.
Okay, so this is kind of interesting to me though. 1.5 billion to construct 26,000 new units.
Yeah.
What I'm curious about is if you take
Did you just do the math?
I just did the math.
How much per unit?
1.5 billion divided by 26,000 units is 57, call it $58,000 a unit for construction cost.
So maybe it's
Even if we
okay.
finance
So
that,
we're subsidizing it. Maybe we're still expecting the
yeah,
developer to cover.
even if we consider that like 20% down payment and we finance the rest, they're looking at that going 288,000 per unit cost of construction. Like, don't get me wrong.
That's more in line with what I would see though for like a high density.
I don't
Because I think that like you can get a detached home built for under $1 million in terms of the construction costs, right? And that's a detached home,
I mean,
right? And we're not talking about land.
I don't
Land
know.
costs, no. But like the actual construction cost was under $1 million. I don't know if it still is.
Well, what they look at.
I don't have
they
that
look at
money,
cost,
so I'm not
well, they
buying.
look at cost per square foot, right?
Right.
So I mean, if we're gonna build like one, bedroom, kitchen, sitting room, all these bachelor suites that are 200 square feet with a bathroom, maybe. But
Yeah.
I don't know. You look at your construction
Yeah.
cost per square foot, and I
Good question.
mean, kudos to them for putting some numbers to it.
Yeah. But hey, shout out
But then
to
if
actual
you're
deliverables.
right, but if you're gonna
yeah.
put numbers to it, they're gonna
Yeah.
get questions,
Look at it.
and I have questions about that.
They would also like to implement province-wide upzoning initiatives to end exclusionary zoning for non-market housing, support nonprofits and housing cooperatives with upfront investment and grant capital and low-interest financing through government-backed construction loans and mortgage guarantees. My just caveat on funding nonprofit real estate is that nonprofit doesn't mean moral and ethical. It just means that they can't have profit, and even that is a very very like politicized term of what is profit, because you can be an executive at a nonprofit and make boatloads of money and you are still a nonprofit because you are investing into the nonprofit, right? Just means that they can't have shareholders, that have dividends, and
Yeah.
like it doesn't mean that you are a good and upstanding person. You'd like to think that you are, but a nonprofit doesn't inherently mean that. And so financing nonprofits to own housing to me just means we're going to have a whole bunch of agencies
Well,
having
yeah.
really, really expensive
It also, yeah,
real
just
estate
basically,
portfolios that, unless they're putting a lien on these properties or something up to a certain amount of money, then we're just financing nonprofits to,
nonprofit, yeah,
and then they could sell to a developer who just so happens to be their brother, cousin, uncle,
whatever.
aunt. Like
But I
we
mean,
don't even know. Like
but the other part about nonprofit is it doesn't mean that things are delivered at cost. They need to make a margin on their products to run. Like they still have to
yeah.
cover their operating costs and pay their people. So
I like the idea of providing the funding for it. I just want to
problems in execution,
Yeah.
big problems in execution.
Make existing public land available for nonprofit housing development and acquire new public land to expand affordable housing opportunities. Recognize community land trusts is crucial for securing land for non-market development. And improve efficiency and transparency at BC Housing to ensure that these units get built. So they also, like the Conservatives, care about transparency. Did you notice which political party didn't mention
Your favorites?
that? No. This is a whole other podcast. That's actually completely unfair to the NDP, but I just find it funny.
Okay.
Completely unfair.
Keep going. Keep going. Protect affordable housing. Protect existing affordable housing stock.
Yeah.
So can we gloss over this one and go to the
rental maintenance fund, nonprofit organizations, again, right of first refusal on sale of rental apartment buildings, preventing the loss of affordable housing. That's actually not a. And again, I'm not necessarily agreeing that nonprofits are where it should be. Maybe BC Housing is where it should be, but like I'm not opposed to the idea of limiting the sale of affordable rentals. Build whole communities. Interesting. So again, we're talking about infrastructure.
Yeah, I like it.
Investing in infrastructure
annually in infrastructure. I like investing in infrastructure.
Yes, housing specifically for families, students, essential workers, seniors, and people with disabilities to meet a diverse needs of the community. So recognizing all of the different needs. I like that. I really like the fact that they went out of their way to put in their platform. These are they're recognizing the need to work with Indigenous communities, the need to work with all different kinds of renters, owners, whoever.
Let's go. Address the commodification of housing.
This is the big one. So maybe we
okay, let's dig into
let's just dig into this one. We glossed over the last one of safeguarding people because we want to talk about commodifying housing, Cameron's favorite topic.
Ooh.
So right off the bat, introduce legislation to formally recognize housing as a fundamental human right.
That's taken a big stand. That's wild. Okay.
I'd love to know how they define housing. I'm always curious whenever they do legislation. Like this is something that matters to me. How do we define what it is that we're?
But I mean that's taking a really big stand on this issue because one of the biggest social issues we're facing is housing a right or is it an asset, like an asset class, like a commodity, like gold? Right. So if we're treating it as a commodity, then let's encourage the financialization of it, offer tax incentives, do things around that allow people to profit from the ownership or the trade of rental property in a variety of ways, or property in general in a variety of ways. If it's a human right, that actually means it can be brought under different kinds of lawsuits encountered. It becomes a constitutional issue. It becomes so many other things.
Right.
It's a really big stand. And whether you like it or not, kudos to them for being explicit with it.
I mean, I'd like to think it is a human right. I'd like to think that housing is a human right, but in BC in particular, I mean, we live in a beautiful place. This is a beautiful province. There's a lot of very desirable places to live in BC. What is the right? Do I have a right to live where I want to live, or do I have a right to live in housing? Right? Are we saying that I have a right to live here in the Lower Mainland specifically, where the cost of living is very high, Or is it generic and saying, well, you have a right to live, but you got to accept that that could be in
Spasm.
Kelowna or Spasm. Yeah, the
Spasm.
brandly
New
newly
Spasm.
creative New Spasm. As Cameron and I are going to be the mayors, and it's New Spasm.
Shared mayor positions?
Oh, well, we'll alternate. You know, have a vacation, right?
Well,
I
I'd
wanna do
rather be
too
a
much
secondary role. That way you can take the public
Okay,
pitfalls.
you can be the vice mayor then. The comptroller.
There
The
we
person
go.
behind the money who nobody ever goes after. Nobody yells at the mayor. Nobody yells at the financial
Nobody
comptroller.
knows who the comptroller is.
Exactly.
Uh,
So I mean, in theory, I really like it, but I would love to see that fleshed out.
yeah,
I'd love to
would
see it
too.
discussed more in
I-
politics in general, actually. Um, Implement regulations to curb the impact of short-term rentals. That's
I think that's already
we've
been
covered
done.
that. It's been done. I mean, I don't see that as being a big policy thing because it's already kind of the policy. Implement a property transfer tax on the transfer of properties to REITs, so real estate investment trusts or limited partnerships with REIT involvement. I like this take.
That
I think this is a hot take,
That's
and I love it.
that is a shot across all the like what you financialized landlords. If you are offering a real estate investment portfolio, in principle, this is like the kind of thing where you could take your RRSP and advance it to a company that works in real estate, like that does that instead of stocks or mutual funds.
Then it becomes a real estate
It's
investment
a
trust.
real estate investment
a REIT,
trust.
yeah.
And there's a specific additional tax for them to buy or sell. I don't know. It's not clear what the nature of the
It
tax
just
is.
says
But
property
oh my
transfer tax, so it could be either. It would be buy or sell, right? It'd be
Well,
on both sides. of the-
typically it's property transfer tax right now is paid on the purchase. So I'm assuming it would be the same, but holy shots fired, Greens. Shots fired.
I like that. I'm really concerned. Like one of my biggest concerns, like legitimately, one of my biggest concerns is what's happening in the United States right now with
yeah.
big investment corporations who have very long horizons for their investments,
Well,
right?
long
Who
horizon
can-
and deep pockets.
and deep pockets who can afford to say like, yeah, we'll overpay on housing. Sure.
Okay, so on that note, so here's how this in
That
theory
terrifies me.
Well, here's how this in theory works. So you go into a subdivision, just generically speaking, and for argument's sake, it's every property is worth 500,000 in the subdivision because they're all pretty much the same, right? And so they buy 10 units at 500,000.
Yeah.
And then they buy the 11th unit at 600,000. You go, well, why are they overpaying for one? Because if you
Prices
right,
up
they
for
just
all of
pushed the
them.
prices up for the other 10 that they bought,
They
and
just
they made $1 million
Yeah.
across their portfolio by spending 100 grand. So it's one of the like it's a way to kind of rig the system.
or they offer them all out for algorithmic rent,
Yes.
and the rental prices shoot up dramatically and people get screwed and housing is commodified. I really like the idea of limiting REITs. What I would actually like though is I'd like a publicly funded REIT. I'd like a provincial REIT. Like where if I was someone who wanted to invest in housing, right? But I didn't want to own my own property, right? I could invest in a controlled REIT where I was offered maybe like a GIC. Like like a bond or a GIC where it's a government investment body where I can invest $100,000. I know I'm going to put whatever your return is there, right?
Sure.
Like a 5%. I don't know. Like we don't need to.
I'm gonna be honest. I
mince
think the
deal.
thing you're talking about exists, and I think
Does it?
I don't know, but I believe. I mean, I'm fairly confident that there are REITs inside of like provincial pension plans and things like that.
Maybe, but I'm talking about like if I wanted to privately invest, like not within a pension plan, but with like
Yeah,
if
okay.
I wanted to buy into a real estate, I could go buy it on Wealthsimple or
Yeah.
Robinhood or insert your
Something.
favorite, trading
yeah.
app here, TD Ameritrade. I don't know, whatever you want
I
to
don't
use.
know, I'd have to. Like somewhere in my memory, it's like I think that exists.
Well,
no, I could be totally wrong.
You
I
thought
think-
shots fired with this. You want to know what their next point is?
No.
Advocate for federal legislation to ban the sale of residential units to REITs. Straight up ban. Not even gonna no tax. Just done.
ban.
Gone.
REITs can't buy. Oh well, hold on. they can't buy residential units. They can still do
Residential units. They
commercial.
can still do commercial.
They can
Yeah.
still do all the
Yeah.
commercial. Seems to be very interestingly
Nobody cares
protected.
about commercial.
No,
Nobody's talking about
it's like a
commercial
free
real
for
estate.
all. Do whatever you
should
want.
talk to a business owner about that because there are massive issues in
Yeah.
commercial like rental rates right now.
Oh yeah.
In fact, it's worse than for residential rental rates.
Interesting. There was a very successful business called the Pie Hole. If you're not familiar, in Vancouver, yeah, the Pie Hole, super popular. I've eaten there like more than a few times. Yeah, it's great. It is exactly that. Go and stuff your pie hole at the Pie Hole. Food was fantastic. They had a great.
Did they close?
They closed their main location because of rents. And they were not they weren't like a failing, struggling business. These guys were thriving. They have a couple of locations. They closed their main location because commercial rent, too much.
Too much.
It's pretty wild. Okay, keep going. I want to see the next one. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, that is pretty wild. We're gonna have to take a pause here.
Hold on. One.
We're back. Sorry, we had an unavoidable delay in getting back to you guys, but we want to continue.
Too much coffee.
Too much coffee. It's Finest Cup, best coffee shop. He still doesn't pay us. We don't even get free coffee, but we advertise him every podcast. Finest Cup, Fleetwood, Surrey.
Has it been everyone?
It has been well, maybe not everyone, but
I mean, to our 8 followers.
But all 8 of you, go to Finest Cup, Fleetwood.
Agreed.
You may meet us there.
We should get that as a professional policy. Like
if you have questions or comments, don't email us. Just come to Finest Cup between the hours of X and X, basically all the time.
Okay, so we were banning the sale on REITs.
We were banning the sale on REITs.
Extend the speculation vacancy tax to all interested communities with revenues directed towards non-market housing.
So that's 2 things. They want to, because right now the speculation and vacancy tax only applies to major like metropolitan areas. So it wouldn't be like Lions Bay, I don't think falls under the speculation and vacancy tax. The interesting part here is that they say interested communities, not they're going to determine what communities, but just if the community is interested, they can participate in the
the other interesting thing is, again, I think this falls in line with their idea that housing is a right. But what's also very interesting is they also seem to think that financialized landlords or financialized ownership or profit driven rental or residential home ownership is a significant problem. And again, I still have big questions about of the total number of units available, how many of them are actually owned by groups that are trying to actively turn that are active business interests. Because if there's not that many, are we just taking shots at a group that's actually not having a meaningful impact?
That's fair. I mean, I am less optimistic about financialized landlords than you are.
Well, I'm just saying, like, are we solving a problem that doesn't exist?
It doesn't exist. And I mean, I think they're solving that more with their desire to go guns blazing at REITs and corporations in housing.
That is very targeted policy.
100% on board with those policies. In fact, I'm a little bit disappointed that the NDP don't have that in their platform.
Ooh, listen up, NDP.
I am disappointed.
Voter feedback right now.
I think that is something that should be in any platform. If you're going to be arguing that you're not pandering to big business, then
take
put your money where your mouth is and hit them where it hurts in the investments. I'm all for that. They want to create a single income tested housing grant for renters and homeowners, merging the homeowner grant and the renter's tax credit for more equitable support. That's another interesting idea because that sort of like levels the playing field a little bit. I don't really know the ins and outs of the renter's tax credit because I never qualified for it. We do qualify sort of for the homeowner grant because we don't have to pay the full property. We pay the
portion of your
portion of the Part B or whatever it is.
What I find interesting is this is a part of their platform that's, again, idea only. There's nothing spelled out here. Like, they have some really clearly spelled out pieces where they put some numbers down. This is one of those vague ones that's like, we're going to do something around this, but it's not worked out yet. So
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, we probably won't see because unless one of the other
yeah,
provincial parties decides to take the platform.
yes, no,
but,
this is
but so far, so I love what you're saying. um, apply a 2% tax on residential property values over $3 million and double existing provincial property tax rates for homes valued above 3 million, 4 million, and $7 million, ensuring high value properties contribute more taxes.
okay. So this is a bit of a double-edged sword to me. So here we go. You see the one side of this. So the one side of this is a story I remember, it was on the news many, many years ago, about a bus driver in West Van who bought his home there in like the 60s. The guy's an old retired
Right,
guy.
right.
And he got his property tax bill and it was $200,000. Now there's two sides to that. He's just a guy who bought a house and paid it off before anybody ever wanted to live in West Van. Like that was, way back when it was just not an in
Sure.
demand area. Now it's valued as like a high end luxury lot. He's got this old house on it that, and there's two sides to that. One is, you won the lottery, take your winnings, cash in your chips, and move on. Don't worry about your bill. But the other part is, he's now kind of forced out of the property bit, which was sort of the nature of the news stories. Oh, he's going to be forced out because he can't pay his taxes. And I know there's
Yeah, I
deferral
mean,
programs and stuff.
I can empathize with that, but I grew up in Coquitlam. I lived in Coquitlam my entire life
I'm so
before I moved
sorry.
to Surrey. It was a beautiful place.
Fair enough. It
Um,
is.
and I can't afford to live in Coquitlam. I can't afford to stay. I had to proverbially cash in my chips and move elsewhere. I moved to Surrey
Yeah.
because that's where it was affordable at the time. And now Surrey's not affordable. And if I wanted to get anything more affordable, I'd have to move even further. So like, I empathize with that concern, but I don't think that that's enough to say that we shouldn't do things like this. I just think it means that you could put some caveats in place, right?
Yeah.
Like
The
you
other
could
thing.
income test your property tax values.
Yeah, you could.
You
The
could do a lot of things. You could like these are going to be edge cases. I don't think there's a lot of
yeah.
like
I mean, this is the
60 to 70
minority.
year
Yeah.
old homeowners that own their property and
The other interesting part about this a way to grab high density tax revenues from low density property, which is another interesting kind of perspective on that
right
policy. Hey,
because
you have X land that's valued at this, but there's only one unit on it, so we're not getting the same taxes we would as if we densified. So we want that tax
so
money
you think
out.
it's just a tax grab.
I I'm just saying it's a perspective on the policy. We're supposed to be unbiased, Joseph,
Mr. Objectivism over here saying this
non-biased.
is a tax grab.
It's a perspective one could take on that policy.
I, I hear it. I mean, you're probably not wrong. But we got to pay for the infrastructure somehow. This is giving us a way to pay for the infrastructure. So,
We'll see.
hey.
We'll see. I mean, but is infrastructure being built there? Okay. Anyway, support the construction industry and innovation.
So again, we have training programs, collaborating with the Construction Association to promote trades as a career option for young people, and position BC as a global leader in prefabricated home technology by investing in innovation and developing comprehensive design guidelines. So these are both very similar to the points that were brought up in the NDP platform. The NDP arguably put their money where their mouth was in the training by specifying what they were going to do, whereas this is a little bit more vague. But you're saying the same thing. You're not committing to anything specific, but you're kind of saying the same thing. Your intention is.
So one of the things here, though, is again, it's a little vague here, but we do, if we are going to position ourselves to build more inventory, we need the workers to build it. And the other part is, I think, this prefab homes. There is a bit of a bias against prefabricated houses. And I will say this, I have walked into some prefab homes that are stunning on the inside. There is nothing wrong with these places. There's some specifics in the sense that for a lot of them, you pay a pad rent, which is sort of like an expensive strata fee, but in principle it's supposed to cover things like the sewer hookups and stuff
Yeah,
like
and I
that.
think they're not even considering prefabricated homes as like the old prefabricated homes that we're thinking about. I think they're thinking more as in like
Modern tiny
ready
houses.
build houses that are, your design is the same. And again, this is kind of actually technically currently being done,
Yeah.
right? Where there is a specific design document. You don't need to get anything approved. You prefabricate elements or modules of that home in BC and you just put it together. It reduces cost because you're not going through the bureaucratic hoops. It reduces timelines. Um, it gets stuff out the door,
Yeah.
right? I think that's kind of what they're. I think
Yeah.
it's not like they
Wait.
want to have a whole bunch more mobile home parks because I don't think
No, I
that
don't think
is what
that's
they're
the case.
saying. I think they just want to
Rid-
see prefabricated houses as like instead of having custom built houses everywhere.
Lego homes.
Yeah, let's have Lego homes.
Lego homes.
Let's have cookie cutter homes, which you notice the conservatives made a very key point in their language around cookie cutter homes. So clearly they are not in favor
No,
of
but
this.
but I mean, I've seen some interesting videos on Instagram or whatever it was where
You've
people
been
were
watching
buying.
the pod home videos.
Yeah, where they
where it's
basically
like,
buy them
are
on Amazon.
are you a person and you can pay this much money? You can live in the pod home. Look, it's like this, and they knock on the wall, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah, but they
well,
literally they're selling these things on Amazon where you literally just kind of
That's
push the
kind of
walls in
interesting.
place. Yeah.
I mean, all the ones I see are from, they're all from China. So I'm like, well, I don't really know how I'm going to get that here.
Shipping.
It might cost me a lot to ship it here. Is it? Do I get free shipping?
I don't.
For
Are you
Amazon
are you
Prime?
Amazon Prime?
Do I get Amazon Prime 2 day shipping?
free shipping on a
Free
house?
shipping on my house.
Okay, I think because this is the Green Party, we
All
were
right,
going to skip
fine,
it,
we
but
can-
the climate proof our housing.
There's some things in here that are interesting. I mean, requiring cooling systems in existing rental buildings or setting maximum allowable temperature for rental units. That's actually very interesting because that's very energy inefficient to currently do it. So that does seem to be a little bit in the face of their climate goals.
Yeah.
Yes, in BC we have very clean energy compared to pretty much the rest of Canada.
Yeah.
But it is a bit interesting to see what they mean by that. Will they mean changing legislation to require stratas to allow energy efficient heat pumps? That I could see that as a policy change. You can steal that for free. Go ahead. Do they mean just you have to have air conditioning units in place? I mean, that's very energy inefficient. So I'm curious what the requirements are, and just in light of the fact that this is the climate proofing our housing, it does seem to be a bit.
Yeah. So let's just run this down. Develop new rebate programs to incentivize deep energy retrofits for housing providers, tenants, and landlords. Provide financial support to households that cannot afford the upfront capital cost for zero carbon
I
technologies.
like that idea.
It's not bad. Introduce measures to protect renters,
That
including
was the
requiring
heating, the cooling system.
implement a province-wide policy to prevent oil and gas hookups in new buildings. Ooh, accelerating
they want that natural gas. The same thing the city of
That's
Vancouver
interesting.
has flip flopped on in terms of their policies and their building code is not allowing natural gas in new builds.
But I like my gas stove.
I like your gas stove too.
Gas stoves are.
I like the pictures I see on Instagram of the food you cook on your gas stove.
Which
I still regret that you did not bring to our in-person podcast recording session.
This is
it's
not
delicious.
a cooking channel.
Go check his Instagram.
This is not a cooking channel.
It's amazing.
No, I haven't posted stuff on there for a while.
Well, you should. You should. It just makes me jealous.
So just on the general climate proof housing, one of the things I like is that they're actually including something about energy efficiency in housing.
Like we said, they've included something for every group. I mean, they've put the time in to identify and name the groups that they are targeting for different elements of their platform. Their platform is really well, just on its surface, very well put together.
So here's something I found just in the last go round of elections, federal, provincial, etc., where I've seen the Green Party run, and I've taken the time to dig in a little bit into their policy documentation. I feel like the Green Party gets a bad rap.
They do,
because they're like this thought of as this extreme left, sacrifice the world to save the environment kind of notion, which when I've read some of their policies are actually quite reasonable, including their financial policies. And again,
And
this is
things like
a
this
yeah,
resilient communities and housing. I
this is
agree.
actually fairly well thought out, independently of of my bias. I mean, I actually quite, as an overall perspective, like their policies. They
I
know
think
who they're, yeah.
of all of the and to be clear, we have just looked at housing platforms today. So we didn't look into transportation and social services. There are likely housing related or adjacent policies in those platforms that would have required a whole lot more digging and a whole lot longer episode. And this episode is already really long. So
Transportation is
like
big.
transportation, there are big planks on those platforms that probably do impact real estate
Hugely.
hugely.
Transportation and real estate are very closely
And
tied.
we want to really clear, like we've joked about being equitable, like we do really want people to look at all the platforms themselves. Don't just take our joking about things
No,
for the
take my
truth.
joking as
Yeah,
totally serious. It's fully biased, so you should vote the way I vote.
which is the Cameron Party of British Columbia.
Yeah.
Yeah, vote Cameron. Uh, paid for the Cameron Society friends and followers. Um, but no, like definitely take your time. Make sure you read through. We just wanted to take this like very high level look at housing policies and just kind of give our thoughts. Like end of the day, what are you feeling about the different platforms? Like as unbiased as you can be.
Uh, Generally speaking, I think in terms of like actually trying to address affordable housing, I feel like that there is not the level of political will required to do it. Because here's the reality. Just in very crass terms, 50% of your voting base are homeowners. 50% are renters because you either do or don't own a
Right.
home. And I know it's probably not quite like
Not
that.
50-50, but yeah.
But, in principle, by saying that we want to make housing more affordable, I'm alienating 50% of my voters. Uh, because half my voters, they don't benefit from housing becoming more affordable. They benefit from an increase in property values. Whereas the other half, so we have these two groups are at odds, is I want to buy a house, I want to buy it for less because I can't afford it the way it is. And let's get a little bit more real about this. And I'm going to talk a little bit more in Metro Vancouver. The average price of a property, I think in 2023, when I last looked at this, where you sort of take every single sale and average out whether it's a condo, a townhouse, detached, it doesn't matter, just
Yeah.
ram them all together, make an average, was just over $1 million. And I know that,
including condos. Like
yeah,
you gotta
that includes
remember,
condos.
low cost condos, and the average is still
And
$1 million.
and when I look at that, I go, even if that average came down by 30%, which would be a market crash in no uncertain
Oh yeah,
terms,
yeah. People would be.
it goes from really unaffordable to less unaffordable. It's not truly affordable when you kind of benchmark that against Canadian median income, which is still shy of I think 60,000. So
Family or individual income.
I think
Individual.
that's individual.
Yeah.
But I mean, even if you double it as 120, that means 30,000 a year. It's still, that notion of affordable housing is still not that great. Like our income and our price disparity is way bigger than a market correction will really account for,
No,
in my mind. I mean, that's my
that's
bias looking at the numbers.
So then, would you argue that the policies that are going to be most beneficial are the ones that don't impact the housing price cost per se, but impact the tangential things around it?
So so impacting tangential, like transit will
Infrastructure.
leads to densification, which does lead to people selling properties, development property, and other things. Transit's big, but the question is, and I think the Green Party is the only party that addresses this. The fundamental problem we need to address moving forward, whether it's in this political or election or just in the long term, is do we really think of housing or residential housing as a human right, or is it a commodity?
Yeah, I think you could look at it this way. If I was to really simplify all three platforms, right? I feel like the BC Conservatives really are treating housing as the commodity, right?
Well, but they also want to
Broad,
create more, I would call that like middle and upper middle class neighborhoods.
sure,
Yeah.
still commodification. There's no
They're
talk
not
about
talking,
pulp.
yeah,
They're
they're
not.
not
They're not.
talking about.
It's very much like you can do whatever you want with your housing. You be a corporation, individual, whatever. Like
We're going to
this is
push
a
this
commodity.
through.
You
Yeah.
do it. Like we're not going to get in the way, right? The NDP have sort of taken this like middle stance where they're
It's
trying to
weird.
appeal to both, right?
Yeah.
And then the Green Party has gone like completely,
Well, they've gone the Green Party way, which is we're going to
yeah,
take a radical stand about
this
it.
is a very radical stance, and maybe that's what's needed. I just reading the platforms. I mean, obviously, again, this is just the housing platforms. Do not make your decisions based off of one platform or one podcast or one anything. Please do your research. Make a decision that
Make
makes.
all your decisions based on as little research as possible.
Don't listen to him. Make an informed choice about what works for you as a voter. But yeah, at the end of the day, just reading through it, like I do really resonate with a lot of what is being said in the Green Platform. Like, I really do. I read it and I go like, hey, I like some of these policies and things. And to be fair, some of these things are already happening,
Yeah.
right?
So,
Um,
so one of the things I'll say, and this is really one of my bias, I like strong platforms. I like that kind of counterflow, and the biggest thing I like about the Green Party platform, which is the one I'm leaning towards right now, it is just the fact that it is so kind of counterculture. Like it's ballsy.
yeah,
We're taking a
yeah,
stand. We're calling people out.
yeah.
We're targeting
Straight up, like
policies
ban
against them.
REITs,
Yeah,
done.
they're not messing around. Now, I have my doubts that they'll get elected. I really do. But they're really not messing around, and they're really claiming some really extreme things. And I think it's time to, it's that shake it up kind of mentality where I like to shake it up.
Yeah, if I'm just evaluating platforms
Yeah.
and nothing else, not track record, not
Anything. Yeah.
who's governed better, not
Well, they've never governed.
yeah, they never have.
Yeah.
But none of those other intangible variables. Just looking at the platforms, I'm with you, Cameron. Like I read this platform and I go, of the platforms, I feel this one has the most things that pop out of it that are actual like bam, 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 bam. Here's what we're gonna do. And I felt like both the NDP and the conservative platforms were very high level. Let's fire shots at each other
Mm-hmm.
and not really like, yes, they brought up things that will impact the housing market, but it was a lot of like, well, they're going to do this and they're going to do this and they're going to do this. Yeah.
So to be fair, the platform I do like the least is the NDP. It's that we're gonna do the 40% first time homebuyer thing. It's like, hey, we don't really understand the problem, but we can create chaos. Like just
Structured
thoughtlessness about how that plays out
I feel like
tangibly.
I feel like before being too unfair to this policy, we probably should look at it in more detail instead of just taking a
Well,
high
then
level
put your
like
detail on your
knee-jerk
website.
response to it. Like, but I agree, just from a knee-jerk response, it's.
Put the detail on your
I also
website.
don't like tribunals though. I didn't really like that word being used in the BC Conservatives platform, to be honest.
You don't want to be subject to a tribunal.
I don't. No,
all
no,
right.
thank you. I'm good. But anyway, thank you everyone for joining us today. If you have any stories about real estate, you want to talk about real estate, you have questions, we want to talk to you. So email us, don'taskanagent@gmail.com. Reach out, and we'd love to hear from you. Come on the podcast, share your story. Thanks, guys.
Have a great day.
Bye.